Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Osterhout. I'm the executive producer here at Lincoln Square, and I'm smiling, but it's not it's not out of joy. I don't know why I'm smiling. Max Flugrath is joining us today. He's from Fair Fight Action, and he's a political strategist and communications director there. Max, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, especially on today. Election day in and off here. Pretty exciting day.
It is. I just got back from voting. It was empty. Every race that I voted for was unopposed, all Democrats, upstate New York. And of course, we're all keeping our eyes on, Virginia and New Jersey and Mamdani. You don't even have to say New York. I wanted to have you on today to talk about the attack on free and fair elections that's happening it's been happening under the surface, but it's currently happening. It's burbling to the top. And this is really a war. I was going to say it's a battle, but there are many battles. There's many fronts on this. And I want to just start top line because we're going to get into several ways that the Republicans are trying to kind of rig the system. But I just want to hear what is this overarching plan with free and fair elections? What's the goal?
Well, well, I think you hit it on the nose, right? You're basically saying it's a far-reaching effort, and it is. What we're seeing is a far-reaching effort from an array of sort of like bad actors on the far right, from Donald Trump in the White House to Republicans in Congress to Republicans in state legislatures to some of these other groups, like the Heritage Foundation and sort of that network of folks, and the Supreme Court. And what we're seeing is a culmination of all these long-standing efforts to try and restrict access to the ballot. Of course, you have Trump in the White House pushing states to gerrymander their maps, rig the maps before the election, so the power of the American people's votes are weakened. You also have him weaponizing the Department of Justice and other sort of federal avenues of power to try and tip the scales. You have Congress pushing legislation like the SAVE Act, which is a massive voter suppression bill that would block tens of millions of eligible American voters from voting. Then you have the Supreme Court. They are currently poised to decide a case which could gut Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which is sort of the key safeguard against racially discriminatory maps. And then, of course, you have sort of these other network of bad actors like the Heritage Foundation, ALEC, the Election Integrity Network, and these folks sort of work in tandem with all these other bad actors to put their folks into key election administration positions, whether it's on the local level, the state level, sort of install folks in government positions to try and mess with, obstruct, or tip the scales on elections. Maybe they're lobbying for voter suppression legislation in the states. Maybe they're drafting model legislation and giving it to Republican legislators to run in those states. So we're really just seeing a large network on the far right that's attacking free and fair elections from an array of vantage points.
Yeah, and that's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. So I want to start at the very top. The DOJ has demanded the Fulton County 2020 ballots, which doesn't seem great. So in that context, and this is happening in Georgia, what is actually first, can they do that? Second, why does the federal government need or want local ballots? What's happening?
Well, I guess the question of can they do that is sort of, I think, a question all of us are are asking from a variety of issues, right?
You're right.
And I think we can kind of toss that out the window right now because whether or not they can doesn't matter. They are,
Right.
and so we need to see this for what it is. It's a escalation of really a ongoing campaign to sow distrust in elections, and it seems to be part of an effort to manufacture a sort of basis to push for new restrictions on access to the ballot in 2026, 2028, and beyond.
hmm this is a sort of this is a massive federal power grab. What implications? should we draw from this? Like, what's at stake with this? I mean, I imagine, like, first of all, a lot of us are seeing, ICE in the streets, and we're seeing, the sort of state-sponsored violence happening, and then there's word that they could take our ballots. It seems really dark. Is this just a grab for elections, or what else is happening here?
Well, before I get to that, I just want to unpack this for a bit. So, like,
Yes.
audit after audit, count after count, judges, including those appointed by Trump and other Republicans, elected officials from both parties, election officials from both parties, independent analysts, academics, they all checked the evidence about 2020, and they didn't find any evidence of widespread fraud that would have changed the outcome of the election.
Right.
Here in Georgia, officials investigated Trump's claims of, thousands, I think it was like 10,000 dead voters supposedly voting in Georgia elections. They found four. So, all four of those were explained. It was folks usually submitting ballots on behalf of their spouses who had passed away, trying to essentially like carry out their wishes in the election, but none of it was evidence of widespread fraud. And especially in all the swing states, there was just nothing found. So what they're doing is they're trying to reignite these claims to manufacture a reason to impose maybe federal power, to maybe support legislation, or by any other means try and reduce access to the ballot, essentially to maintain their grip on power in 2026 and beyond. It lines up perfectly with the very out in the open Republican scheme to rig all the maps. They're not
Right.
hiding it; they're saying the quiet part out loud. They are very worried about what will happen if the 2026 election is independent and fair, because they know Democrats will win across offices, across levels, and likely take back the U.S. House. And some think there could be even a path to retake the Senate.
I mean, right. And I want to get to redistricting it a little bit, but just kind of holding on this idea of federal control over elections. New York Times has published reporting on, the president's team discussing, fake national emergency to justify seizing control of elections. And so just first break down how elections actually work, from local to federal. And this is, I think most of our audience probably knows this because we're all constantly online and all of this kind of thing. But I think it's helpful to just understand how the Fed is involved in elections, and how states run elections, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. States administer their elections.
Mhm.
There are federal elections in states, but states still administer those elections. And so Congress can pass laws that impact how states conduct those elections, but states also pass their own election laws. And it's important to remember the president has no constitutional authority to impose his will on elections or change election processes or really meddle in elections at all. And so this idea of like the fake national emergency that they were pushing, those powers they wanted Trump to have to go around Congress and impose new rules on state and local governments on elections, those powers don't exist.
Right.
And that doesn't mean they won't try it though, right? They're already pushing the boundaries of power. They're overreaching. They're really just doing everything and anything they can. And so it's still important to pay attention to be wary of, because they very well could try it. But what I find the most interesting about that sort of manufactured fake national emergency is if you look closely at the New York Times reporting, the folks from Trump's team were talking about this as early as March of this year.
Wow.
And the way they're discussing it, it almost seems like they want to find evidence that 2020's election outcome was somehow tampered with. And again, we know that's not true. So you have DOJ pushing for ballots, which really seems like a way to forward this plan. If they get the ballots, they could do a lot of things with them. They can manipulate data. They can present things in a certain way. And of course, given everything that this regime, not really an administration, this regime has done, I don't think any of us would put lying past them either. They spread false information fairly regularly. So when you look at that sort of plan to do a national emergency, it does connect directly to this new DOJ demand to get these ballots.
And so I mean, I feel like a lot of these elections stories can be a little wonky, a little weirdly ephemeral, or like a lot of dots and T's crossed, and a lot of legal jargon. But it comes down to this: if I'm hearing you right, you get the ballots, the sort of the primary unit of our democracy, a ballot, and whoever in Trump's mind has that ballot or has control over, like physical control over that ballot, is able then to interpret the results or the outcome of that election or that ballot. I mean, this is what you're saying to some degree is, give me the ballots and I'll tell you who won.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, it feels very dark. And it also, we do a lot of stories on polling, and Trump is polling in the tank. Nobody likes what he does. People don't like him. He's underwater. His policies are underwater, and they don't, broadly, we don't trust him on the economy or national security or, so on and so forth. And it almost feels like this is an attempt to just say, who cares? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think your characterization is right. I mean, I think Trump and Republicans widely understand that they're unpopular right now. And that's why they're trying to change the rules to the game. They're trying to restrict access. They're trying to push these false claims of fraud, because it's really their only way to hold on to power if the elections are independent and fair. If the American people have their say at the ballot box, which is how our representative system of democracy is supposed to work, Republicans are going to lose seats at every level of government across the board.
Before we move on, I want to, Caroline Levitt had a statement. I think it was today. Can we run that real quick?
The president posted on Truth Social that the voting underway in California is, quote, rigged. What evidence does he have of that, and what does it mean that mail-in ballots in that state are under legal and criminal review? By whom and why? And also, in this vein, does the White House still plan to issue an executive order banning mail-in voting, and what legal authority do you have to do that?
The White House is working on an executive order to strengthen our elections in this country and to ensure that there cannot be blatant fraud, as we've seen in California with their universal mail-in voting system. It's absolutely true that there's fraud in California's elections. It's just a fact. It is just a fact. They have a universal mail-in voting system, which we know is ripe for fraud. And if you want to deny that, I'm happy to provide you all of the evidence for it. I'd be glad to send that to you after this briefing.
Rigged.
Fraudulent ballots that are being mailed in the names of other people, in the names of illegal aliens who shouldn't be voting in American elections. There's countless examples, and we'd be happy to provide them. As for executive action the White House is taking, yes, we are looking into that. And like any executive order, of course, any executive order the president signs is within his full executive authority and within the confines of the law. Stephen.
Ugh, God. I mean, she says everything. She lays it all there. It's propaganda, it's lies, and she's outlining the whole plan. What did you think of that when you heard it?
Well, first of all, they're deploying these supposed election monitors to both New
That was my
Jersey
next question. Yeah, I was going to ask
and
about that.
California. But there's no federal elections in either of these states. There's only state elections right now. So, it begs the question, why? And so, you have her out there saying it's fraudulent. You have her, saying she'll provide evidence. But again, if you go back to the 2020 election, where is the evidence? It was presented in courts. It was not presented in many instances, and that's why a lot of those cases were tossed out. So, we've been waiting for this supposed evidence. And I think that tracks back to what the DOJ is doing, right? It seems like they want to manufacture some evidence. But to her point about, another executive order coming and the president, having this evidence of rigged elections, again, it all tracks back to the control. It does speak directly to the plan. So, sow doubt right now in the outcomes, maybe use the DOJ to get data to potentially manufacture some evidence and use that as a pretext, right? In line with the sort of like fake national emergency strategy to, again, change the rules, restrict access to the ballot, basically do whatever you can to put your thumb on the scale and keep your party in power.
So you mentioned the, sending operatives into states, and is that happening now, today?
That's what they said. The DOJ supposedly sent these election monitors to New Jersey and to California. I believe the acting U.S. attorney in New Jersey put out some sort of like strange video statement about this yesterday. Sort of reminding people that any fraudulent voting will be prosecuted.
And is there any reporting on what this looks like? As I've worked the polls before, and I had a Republican monitor, Republican appointed monitor, like sitting behind me, and we were all friendly. It was fine. This seems a little bit different than that. Do you know what this looks like at the polls on the ground?
I don't. I haven't seen any reporting on it yet. Doesn't mean it's not out there. But
Mhm.
one thing I just want to offer up as something for thought is Congress, specifically the House of Representatives, also has the ability to send out election monitors to kind of just watch things, make sure things are going well, no one is doing anything wrong. But if Democrats are able to take back the House in 2026, what's to stop Democrats from responding, in kind, right? And of course, not to push claims about fraud and to try and intimidate folks, but to be an actual method of oversight, maybe against the DOJ that could be there to do something, potentially nefarious.
Right. I mean, I can imagine on the first of all, it doesn't seem like it's in the Democrat style to send monitors. I wish they would, ultimately, not to coerce or to have some sort of intimidating presence, but really to make sure that voters are safely able to pull the lever. But it does. I've also heard rumors that ICE or federal agents may want to guard polling sites in blue cities and blue states, which feels very coercive and intimidating. So what do we do? How do we? I mean, there's a flood of propaganda coming out of the White House. There, like you said, there's nothing constitutional that allows the president to take over local elections or state elections, but he's going to do it anyway.
He'll try.
He'll try. What is the backstop for that?
Well, I think it's good old fashioned organizing, right? It's talking to your friends, your neighbors, your family, your community, sharing accurate information, encouraging them to get registered and make a plan to vote. And also going beyond that, look to some local pro voting rights organizations in your area. So, for example, here in Georgia, my organization, Fair Fight, we share verified information with people about elections, making sure they know where their polling location is, making sure they know the hours, making sure they know, when they can vote early, when is the deadline to request vote by mail ballot, things like that. So,
Right.
there's a lot of organizations out there trying to spread the word. I'm sure there are many in your community, wherever you are. Reach out to them, ask them what they're doing, ask how you could get involved. And one other way I'd say is, look at the state legislative, look at the congressional races in your area that are going to be on the ballot in 26. Can you volunteer for those folks? Can you donate to them? How can you help them be successful? Especially as we see Republicans just trying to blatantly rake the maps, we will need to do everything possible to make sure Democrats win across the board.
You're right. I like I said, I worked the polls one year, and it was an incredible experience, and it also opens your eyes to the process. Once you've undergone that experience, you know how ridiculous these claims of fraud are. It's really dumb.
And speaking about ridiculous, real quick, if I could,
please.
So this whole DOJ pushing for the ballots in Fulton County in Georgia, this is really being carried out by like a chorus of voices online. I think it was last Friday, all of a sudden, all these big right-wing accounts are tweeting very similar things online. And even coming from the actual DOJ itself, from people like Ed Martin and Harmeet Dillon. But then you have Steve Bannon, who, of course, was like one of Trump's top strategists. You have Cleta Mitchell, who was
Right.
a key architect of his plot to overturn his 2020 loss, and who then founded the Election Integrity Network, which is wrapped up in a lot of this stuff. But one official that really caught my eye was a local Georgia official here named Sally Grubbs. And Sally Grubbs is a vice chair of the Georgia Republican Party. And in 2020, she got wind that there was a shredding truck. So a truck that like takes documents from government offices and shreds them. And apparently her and a friend of hers saw that they had ballot envelopes for mail ballots. And they thought these envelopes were full of ballots that someone was doing something nefarious with. They jumped in their car, they chased down the truck, they blocked it. They got out and like tried to record the guy shouting questions at him. They called 911.
Oh my God.
They went to the police station, they filed a report, and they were like bewildered as to why the literal FBI did not come in immediately and just like kind of get into it, figure out what was going on. It turned out that the envelopes were empty and they were being disposed of, in accordance with, local procedures, with state laws. The FBI in the end did investigate and found that there was nothing done wrong. But, these videos that Sally Grubbs and her friend posted online were amplified by people in the Trump orbit, some of his attorneys at the time, and they went viral. And the shredding truck company ended up getting like death threats. They had to like shut down their operations. So, it just goes to show you who are the folks pushing for these ballots, right? They're not serious people who are bringing evidence. They're partisan operatives who want to influence an outcome of an election.
Well, and it sounds like, the guy who shot up the pizza place, right, was a believer. He believed that there was a cabal of pedophiles in the basement of a pizza place. And if you believe that, then perhaps you have a moral duty to go investigate or stop or so on and so forth. And so, this Caroline Leavitt propaganda is infecting the minds of people who are already partisan, who are already believers.
Yeah. And it's not just coming from these, random far right operatives anymore. It's coming from the literal White House.
Right. I mean, imagine it. It sounds so absurd that you would see a truck, a paper shredding truck, and then connect 1 million dots and draw that conclusion.
Yeah.
But this is where we are, Max.
Unfortunately.
We had Amir Badat on from Fair Fight last week, and I spoke to David Daly yesterday, the author of Rat Fucked, about
great book,
incredible, about this effort, and all of the things we've talked about today are part and parcel of this effort to make elections essentially not matter, right?
Yeah.
That's what we come down to, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the sort of the next the redistricting fight, the gerrymandering fight that's happening, and I just want to bring this up because if the federal control of elections doesn't work for them, if the propaganda doesn't work for them, if creating a fake national emergency doesn't work for them, they're going at this route as well. And this is, the very famous, infamous now effort to redistrict mid-decade, and it's already having huge results. And it would mean essentially that the Democrats, instead of having to win 2 seats or 3 seats to take back control, they would have to win like 19.
Yeah.
How does this fit into the broader picture in your mind?
Well, it's another front of the attack. So you laid out some of the other ones, but if you can't restrict access enough with legislation, if you can't abuse federal power enough to intimidate or kind of coerce, or whatever word you would use to describe sort of this overreach of federal power, the most simple way to do it is to just change the maps, right? It really just weakens the votes of eligible American voters, and so that's why they are moving at such a rapid pace and so blatantly to try and do this ahead of the 26th election.
Mm-hmm.
Another interesting thing that I think really just belies this point is the White House went down to Congress a couple months ago and told them that they need to essentially rebrand their, big beautiful bill. They decided to call it, I think it was the Working Families Bill or something like that, Working Families Budget. And so I think that really tells a lot of this story. They're doing polling constantly. They are doing focus groups constantly. I'm sure they understand that they are sort of underwater with the voters. I mean, look at folks showing up at Republican town halls. There was a guy a couple months ago that told his Republican representative to get his head out of Trump's ass. That is the mood that they are dealing with here. And they are grasping at any straws they can to try and keep their heads above water with respect to maintaining their House majority. And so that's why you have, White House directly pressuring Texas to redraw their maps. That's why you have Missouri following suit, North Carolina, Indiana's doing it now, Kansas, Florida's expected soon, and Ohio just passed a map, I think last week, that gave Republicans, I want to say 1 or 2 more seats.
Yeah, one or two. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so Democrats are responding. Of course, Proposition 50 in California today, it's widely expected to win. And, Illinois, Leader Jeffries just visited there. I think it was either last week or the week before that. And the governor, J.B. Pritzker, seems to understand the logic of responding in kind to this Republican push. In New York, there was a lawsuit filed challenging the maps. And I believe Virginia said they're redrawing their maps. So, Democratic states are starting to respond. And of course, in a vacuum, Democrats don't support partisan gerrymandering. We've actually, advanced legislation, or at least introduced it in Congress in the states to try and ban it. But we're not in a sort of politics as usual moment. We're witnessing an attempted authoritarian takeover of our elections and our democracy. And so I really hope, if this Proposition 50 result is strong, which it's expected to be, I hope it will inspire some other Democratic states to follow suit and really recognize the moment that we're in, because their inaction is really a disservice to the fairness of the entire election.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I asked David Daley about this yesterday, and he had a similar response, but also, said the math still doesn't math, as it were. That
It's tough.
There's just not enough Democrats or not enough states to offset the red wave of redistricting in this case. I want to just 2 more questions. I want to look ahead at the next 2 to 3 election cycles. And look, we've already been interviewing, candidates for 26. This cycle it's already here, really. What do you see out of all of these issues that we've pinpointed today? What are you most afraid of? What's the biggest threat?
Well, I actually think the Supreme Court may be the biggest threat here. As I mentioned earlier, they just actually reheard a case. So the case is called Louisiana v. Calais, and essentially it boils down to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And what court watchers think is going to happen is that the far right justices are going to rule in a way that either greatly diminishes the power of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act or strikes it down completely. And Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is the sort of like main safeguard against racially discriminatory maps. So, that was created because you had a long history of, especially in the South, legislators drawing maps in such a way that they would split, minority communities right down the middle. They would put them in with a larger white community. So that way it sort of weakened the power of their votes, and they really never had a fair chance to elect a representative that was, understanding of or representative of their needs and their priorities. And so if this Section 2 is overturned, Fair Fight, my organization, alongside another group called Black Voters Matter Fund, we did an analysis that showed that if Section 2 is struck down, it could let Republicans redraw maps in such a way that they would gain 19 additional safe seats in Congress. And so that would really be a massive push in terms of their plan to cement power and insulate themselves from the accountability of the American people's votes.
Yeah, and from traditionally Black districts as well, it would sort of disenfranchise huge swaths of the population, particularly the South, right?
Yeah, it would basically gut the whole like core American freedom and value of fair representation, which our country was literally founded on.
Yeah. Uh, oy. Well, maybe then they wouldn't have to take over federal control of elections. They would, they would have the numbers they need to. Oy, that's not funny. But the last thing I want to ask is, what gives you hope?
Well, I think people are seeing what's happening, and I don't think the propaganda apparatus from the White House and their far right allies is working as well as they think.
Right.
You know, Trump's been in office for what, 10 months now? Prices have not gone down. Inflation is not significantly down. Things are not really better. And I think people's lived experiences are not aligning with sort of the propaganda that the White House is putting out. Trump did an interview with 60 Minutes, and the interviewer was talking to him about how grocery prices are down, and he just said, "No, they're not." No, sorry, she said grocery prices are up, they're not down, and he said, "No, you're wrong, they're not." And I think people are not seeing this in their real lives, and they're not believing what they're saying. So I think you're going to see big turnout. I think you may even see a lot of folks voting for Democrats that don't usually do so. And it's not unprecedented to think that potentially we could see a sort of wave election in 26 with people just very frustrated, very fed up, and very unhappy with what's happening. There's been some analysis that Democrats would need a really strong wave election to win. But we're seeing unprecedented overreaches of power. So the response from voters could also be unprecedented. And that's why it's so paramount to spread the word. And programs like yours doing that are so important right now to get accurate, verified information so folks really know what's going on and they can plan their votes accordingly.
Yeah, that's it. And it does feel like Trump knows, or at least those around him know, the polling's shit. He is in the absolute drain. But rather than moderate their policy or actions or truth social tweets or truths or whatever, they want to pick their voters and subvert democracy rather than change. Well, Max Flugrath, it's such a pleasure to have you. I would love to have you back to talk more about this, especially once the Supreme Court comes down on the Voting Rights Act, and maybe get Amir back as well. But you're doing amazing work. Can you tell us where we can learn more about Fair Fight and get involved, and where we can go to support you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to fairfight.com. That's our website. You can find opportunities to volunteer, opportunities to donate, great information on elections. And then on social media, our handle is @FairFightAction all across the board. So wherever you're at, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, that's where we're at.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for joining. And everyone, if you have not already, go vote. Doesn't matter if there's no choice, you have one person to vote for, go vote for them. Turn out.
Just make sure there's elections. In Kentucky, some folks tried to show up to vote thinking there was elections. There are no elections in Kentucky.
Well, then don't vote in Kentucky. All right. Thanks, Max. See you next time.
Thanks, Sam.